Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to this session on Python tuples or tuples, depends on how you're comfortable in pronouncing it. Let's quickly go through some of the common tuples properties. So tuples are ordered, they can contain multiple data types, and the most important one, tuples are immutable. Immutable means you cannot modify the value of a tuple. So in short, they are like lists. The only difference is we are going to use normal parentheses instead of square brackets to define tuples. They are immutable, and unlike Python list, tuple will not have methods like append, remove, extend, insert, and pop. Because tuples are immutable, so it doesn't make any sense to have these methods available for tuple. Next, let's see how we can define tuples. So as I said, you can use normal parentheses to define a tuple. So here I'm defining a num tuple, which is containing elements like integers, string, and float values. Once I execute this cell block, you can see this is how my tuples looks like. The second way to define a tuple is by using the inbuilt tuple method. I'm passing a list to this tuple method, and of course you can create a tuple by using a list. The only thing I'm doing is I'm using my tuple method to create a tuple from this list. Once I execute this cell block, this is how my new number tuples looks like. It has some integer element and a string element. So next is a peculiar way of defining a singleton tuple in Python. What is a singleton tuple? It's a tuple which has only one element. Now how to define a single element tuple is by using this trailing comma after your single element. Now this looks way weird, right? So let's say if I remove this comma, what happens? This can also be a tuple with a single element, right? So if I execute this and if I use my inbuilt type method to check what is the data type of this one underscore tup variable, it's showing me integer. Now why integer? Because in Python we know that the normal parentheses is also using for expressions. So that's why here Python is unable to differentiate between the parentheses that we give in expression and the parentheses that we use to define tuple. So that's why if you want to define a singleton tuple, you need a trailing comma after your element. If I execute this now and again check the type of my variable, it is showing to me as a tuple now. So this is a peculiar way of defining a singleton tuple in Python. Let's examine our num tuple that we just created. So it has 5 elements. Now as I said, tuples are very similar to list. In fact, tuples are considered as cousin to list. So in list we have seen how we can use square bracket notation to access the element using index. The same property will be applied here, and of course we are going to use square brackets to use to access the tuple element. This square brackets will not be replaced by normal parentheses. So this one property is being retained from list, that we are going to access the elements of tuple using square brackets. So if I do here num of 2, I'm getting the output as string 2. Now remember, Python is a zero-based indexing language. So of course if I want to access the third element, I have to give the index as 2. What about list slicing or tuple slicing? Of course, the same slicing concept which was available in list is present here also, and the end index will be excluded from my result. So if I execute this, I'm going to get 1, string 2, and then integer 2 in output. What if I want to get the last element of my tuple? If you remember, in list we have seen if we give -1, we get the last element of our list. The same property is retained for tuple, and now you can see I'm getting my 3.14, which is the last element for my tuple, in the output. What if I want to reverse my tuple? So as simple as that, we have again seen in the list topic. So if you want to understand these concepts in more detail, please visit the list section of the previous video that I created. Now if I want to reverse my tuple, of course I can use this 2 colons and then -1. In output I'm getting my reverse tuple output. We have also seen a length function. So this len is a universal function. You can pass different arguments to it or different data type arguments to it. Earlier I was passing a list name. This time I'm passing a tuple name. So what it gives me in the output is the length or the number of elements present inside my data type. So here if I run this, I'm getting the output as 5. So I have 5 elements, so the length of my tuple is 5. We have 2 very interesting methods. The first one is count for my tuple. So to access the count method, of course we are going to use the dot notation. So tuple dot count, and I'm passing an argument which is the value of 0, right? So the number of times this particular element coming in your list you will get in the output. Now if I execute this, I'm getting an output as 1 because I have only one instance of 0 present in my list. Next is the index method. So again, to access index method you can use the dot notation. What if I want to know the index of a particular element? So that's why we use index method. So in index method, if you pass the element value, it is going to give you the index. So now the index of this string element 2 is 2. Next, how you can modify a tuple, right? So in bracket I have written here it's not possible because tuples are immutable, but let's say even I want to do that. So if I execute this cell block, Python is going to throw me an error and it will be saying that tuple object does not support item assignment. It's basically saying tuples are immutable and you cannot modify its value. Alright. Next is how I can concatenate two tuple elements. So I have creating a new tuple object here, which is tuple underscore add, and in my num element or the num tuple that I have, I'm adding two extra element by using the concatenation operator plus. If I execute this, you can see now two extra elements are added to my tuple underscore add or are added to my num tuple. Next, what if I want to multiply my tuple, right? So I have a num tuple which is 2, 4, and now I'm multiplying it by 2. So the output that I expect here is 4, 8, right? But this is wrong because you cannot modify the value of a tuple. So if I execute this and I check how my tuples look like, this multiplication operator is actually repeating my tuple. So that's why it's 2, 4 and 2, 4 again. It's the output is not 4, 8. So if you're taking some Python certification, this question is very common. So you have to be careful that when multiplication operator is used here, it is actually repeating the elements of tuple. It's not multiplying it. The next concept is tuple unpacking. So whenever you create a tuple, actually all these elements are getting packed into this single element unpack underscore tuple. What if I want to unpack this? So to unpack this, on my left hand side I will have the exact number of variables that I have in my tuple. So you cannot have less variable names, you cannot have more variables name. You should have the exact number of elements that you have in tuple. So in my tuple I have 4 elements. The first is male, second is integer number, third is again a string Chandler, and the last one is again a string which is Bing. So if I want to unpack these elements into these 4 variables which says gender, age, first name and last name, I can do like this. As I said, you have to use the exact number of variables as you have the number of elements in your tuple. Now if I execute this cell block, in the output I'm getting gender is male, age is 10, first name is Chandler, last name is Bing. Next, the value swap using tuples. So if you go in any programming language, if you want to swap the value of 2 variables, you always have to use a variable temp, right? But not in Python. So let's see how we'll do that. So I'm defining 2 variables, a equals to 3 and b equals to 8. If I print them, you can see they are looking like 3, 8, and you have normal parentheses around them, so it's a tuple. In Python, all you have to do is just write a, b using the assignment operator and then assign the value of b, a to this. And if I execute this and again check the value, now the values are swaps, right? This is how much simple it is to swap the value of 2 variables or 2 integer variables in Python. The last topic for today is why use a tuple instead of a list. So there are 2 reasons. First, program execution is faster when manipulating a tuple in comparison to list. Now if you have a very small tuple and a very small list, you won't notice this difference, but if you have a big list or a big tuple, let's say millions and billions of elements, then you will notice that tuples are much faster in comparison to list. The second reason is sometimes you don't want your data to be modified, right? So let's say I'm using a constant of pi equals to 3.14 and you don't want to accidentally modify your value in program anywhere. So you will define your value as a tuple. So these are the 2 reasons that why we should use tuple instead of a list. Alright guys, that's all for today's session. Thanks for watching. Happy learning and stay safe.